Yeah. Well, what did you do? Did you Saturday? Well, you obviously worked. What did you do before you?
Nothing. Not on Saturday anyway. I had a thing for my mum's birthday yesterday. She's 60 next week. Olivetto, Olivetto, was it? On Rose Lane.
Yeah. Any good?
Yeah, it was actually. Yeah, it was nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. But other than that, quiet one.
Yeah.
What you get up to?
Same, quiet. Hello there, and welcome to the latest Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo. I'm your host, Joe Rimmer, joined today by, and only by, Paul Gorst. How are we, Paul?
Good. Yeah. It was a strange one, not having a fixture to enjoy or endure over the weekend. But we're going to get all stuck into that, aren't we? But yeah, keeping busy.
I like just being on a date with you here. It's nice. We've got rid of those people who are worrying.
The gooseberries, doilies, and the squires.
Yeah, we've trimmed the fat on the Blood Red podcast. Tell us if you like it more, and we'll never bring doily back.
We'll say that. It's one less contributor for. We'll have to fill in for everything.
Yeah. It was a strange old weekend, wasn't it, with the derby being called off. We'll get into that. We still got plenty to talk about, I think, and obviously we've got a fixture tomorrow night at Girona. Liverpool training as we speak. But before we get into it, first of all, a big thank you to our sponsors, Nord. Doyley will be using them as he's out and about in Spain. Do you know what time he flew?
Actually, I don't know his whereabouts today, but I think he's flying to Barcelona and then maybe getting the train across. Yeah.
He'll be there for the press conference only this evening. Liverpool have a press conference, I think, at 6:30 our time, 7:30 their time. So, he'll be using Nord as he works out there, and to get the best discounts off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/bloodred, and our link gives you 4 months on the 2 years plan. There's no risk at all with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, and the link is in the podcast episode description box. We are live on YouTube, so if you've got some comments, questions, just pop them in the chat there, and I'll try and get to them as we go. Give us some thumbs up, some likes, some stars wherever you are. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, some stars there, some comments. I always like to read the comments, so please do. And if you'd like to drop me, several of you do drop me questions by email. Always happy to take them. It's joe.rimmer@reachplc.com, and I'll pick them up there. We did get an email this week from a Ryan who is a listener. Thank you, Ryan, if you're listening now. But he did tell me that whoever has the shaky leg or taps the table to chill out. And I don't know who that might be.
Well,
so
if he's listening today, Ryan, then he can keep an eye on it. And if it doesn't happen today, we know it's not me or you.
So it's got to be Doyle or Squires. That's the only.
Could be Kiefer.
Could be Kiefer. But seeing as he sent it to me, I'm not usually on the ones that Kiefer's on because he usually hosts. It could be. Our producers now just put his hand up and said it could be him.
Put his hand up and just put himself in the thick of it.
I'll keep an eye on him throughout this. But thank you, Ryan. Thank you for supporting. If you want to drop me an email, please do. joe.rimmer@reachplc.com. We usually record Mondays, Fridays. So if you send me one, I'll try and get to your question during the pod. Yeah, Gorsty, plenty to talk about. Let's start with contracts. Let's start with Salah. Obviously, David Ornstein of The Athletic last night putting out a report that Liverpool have made an official offer. I think it was 2 weeks ago that you spoke to
2 weeks at Southampton.
In the mixer, and he said that he hadn't had an official offer at that point. One is now reportedly landed. I mean, it makes sense, but does it give you hope that Liverpool are finally getting things sorted out, or do you think it's the start of another long process?
Yeah, it's difficult to say, isn't it? Because it doesn't necessarily say when the offer was. It was similar to the update with Virgil van Dijk on Wednesday, was it? There was a similar story from David on that one. And yeah, I mean, people I speak to at Liverpool sort of under sworn orders not to talk about contract situations, which is basically a blanket rule at Liverpool. Yeah. So difficult to sort of get any further information that way. And Salah's camp, I guess you'd describe them as unavailable for comment. Still waiting to hear back from them, but don't doubt that this is accurate from David Ornstein, who's one of the absolute best around, isn't he? And It was an interesting update because it was only 2 weeks ago that Mo told us in the mix zone at Southampton that there'd been no official offer. Obviously, it doesn't mean to say that the talks weren't ongoing or hadn't started or anything like that. Someone speaking to on the way back from Southampton after speaking to Salah, and they were adamant that talks were ongoing, and they were described as positive with Rami Abbas, and the hope was that a resolution could be reached. So maybe this is the start of that. There's no suggestion either way at this stage that it's something that Salah has turned his nose up at, or how far away they are from an agreement. Mm-hmm. I guess it's fair to say that because there is no agreement, that does mean in turn that perhaps has turned it down. But just the way Salah speaks and what we know, he's absolutely desperate to stay at the club. So there's a willingness on both sides to find the resolution here. I guess it's just the specifics around it, whether that's as bonus related, whether that's general per week wage, or whether it's the length of the contract, or maybe it's all three. There's a lot of talk that needs to happen for a deal of this scale. The biggest one that Liverpool have ever handed out to Salah, to anyone at the club, actually was 2 years ago, wasn't it? So by extension, this means that it's going to be the biggest one that they've ever dealt with as well. So yeah, progress, a step in the right direction, I'd say, for supporters who were waiting any sort of further updates, since Salah said 2 weeks ago that he was disappointed that no offer had been put across the desk of Rami Abbas.
Yeah, we've got, by the way, we're getting some good questions in on YouTube. So if you have asked a question, I will. I'm making notes of them, so I will get to them as we go on throughout the podcast. Yeah, I wonder whether, obviously Salah had said a couple of weeks ago that Liverpool hadn't made an official offer, and I think we discussed at that time that perhaps, I think people misconstrued that a little bit to mean that Liverpool hadn't really even opened talks when the talks were ongoing. It was just that I think the way I read the situation was surely that Liverpool would only make an official offer when they were more confident that would be considered, maybe not accepted, but certainly considered by Salah and his agent. So I wonder now if an offer has gone in, it sounds certainly like it has, that Liverpool are now more confident they're getting to a place, they're closing the gap and getting to a place where Salah is more likely to accept. So I do think it's encouraging. I mean, you wrote a story, didn't you, 2-3 months ago, that Salah was desperate to stay. Since then, we've seen him publicly act that out, from saying it directly from his mouth and the way he's played and acted, social media. And we were talking, where we last night, you see all these different hints all over the weekend. And I think we're at this stage where people are just making up these great theories. So I saw
a couple of interesting ones.
Yeah, a guy tweeted yesterday, a friend, so I won't name him, but I thought it was funny. He said Liverpool were tweeting hat tricks of Salah yesterday, and this would be his third contract with the club. So could it be
no pin tweet as well?
Yeah, no pin tweet. Yeah.
Also, as well, Salah on social media with the white smoke sort of billowing out from his coffee table, and there's some theory that white smoke is a kind of indicator across.
It's the Pope, isn't it?
It's just that, certain religions, that it means that an agreement has been made, and it's sort of the turning of a corner. But I don't know how much Salah, the Egyptian, pays to stuff like that. But yeah, it's just interesting when you see all these little things, and supporters, they love a theory or two, don't they? Yeah. And I just found it all interesting because usually a lot of it is sort of rooted in that is reaching quite far, but some of these last night that I was reading, you sort of think, maybe there's something in that, but we await further progress, I guess.
And you know what? I wouldn't put it past Salah. We saw the last time they obviously did the little thing with his agent, didn't he? Where his agent did the public tweet.
Yes. Yeah.
And they played that game with supporters. I mean, don't get me wrong. I do think it's quite a cruel game to play with weeks now until he can talk to other clubs. But I do find that I wouldn't be surprised if this is something that when they eventually, hopefully, they announce it, they have all these little things where Salah's done things recently and planted these seeds. So
maybe he meant to go on the record at Southampton.
Maybe.
It's an orchestrated sort of plan of action, is it, from Salah and Rami, from the social media post after the Brighton game?
Whatever happens now, yeah.
And the celebration down the Anfield Road, then when he sort of sits on the barrier, and I just, what that means to him. It feels like it's more than just a standard celebration to me. Little things like that. It's almost like I'm the main man, I want to stay here. What is up the sleeve of the club? But like we say, this update from David Ornstein last night is encouraging. It's a step in the right direction, but it wasn't necessarily a. You get the feeling sometimes that deals are perhaps closer at certain points, and I didn't get the feeling that this one is, and haven't had that sort of relayed to me either way that it is close. So we'll await further updates. And Slot will get asked about it, of course, today, won't he? And he'll play the straight bat, of course he will. But who else do you speak to about these things? On the record. So Slot will carry on getting asked about it.
Yeah, I do think Salah has morphed, isn't he, in the way that he plays his football for Liverpool. Like you say, those moments where he's sitting on the barrier and stuff like that. When he first arrived, and for the first good 5 or 6 years, I think he was at Liverpool, I felt like he was more like the cold-eyed marksman that could go and play for Real Madrid and could go and play for other clubs and still be a similar player. But now he almost feels like Mr. Liverpool in the way that a Gerrard did. That it's like, I can carry this club and they can carry me. So it feels, it just feels more, especially I think as well since bigger personalities. I think we've talked about this in the pod before. Since big personalities have left the club, whether it was Henderson and Milner a few years back, Mane, Firmino, that sort of era of players, and now Klopp, it feels like he's taken on more and more responsibility that he is one of the real leaders just all around the club now, and
100%,
he represents them really well. So,
I mean, it's a long time at one club, isn't it?
Yeah.
What is it? Is he into his 8th season now?
2017.
2017 he joined. Yeah. So, yeah, you're right. Like this Liverpool feels like Klopp said it, didn't he? Liverpool 2.0. And it certainly felt like that at the beginning of last summer when they basically signed an entire new midfield. And you've still got the stalwarts, your Van Dijk, Alisons, Robertson, and Salah. And Salah has been the main man this season again. And yeah, you're right. It just feels now as though he's more talismanic than he's ever been, really.
Certainly agree with that. And he's not slowing down. So, I think there's been talk over how long would you give him. I just think, if they gave him a 3-year, I mean, what's the worst that can happen? That after 2 years that they think, we need to evolve here and move Salah on. I still think in 2 years' time there'd be a queue of clubs, whether they be the Inter Miamis, the Saudi clubs, or whether the likes of Real Madrid, people like that would still hold an interest. I think if Liverpool wanted to move him on and he wanted to move on, there'd be a queue of clubs for him. You're never going to struggle, are you?
Yeah.
Ronaldo never struggles to find a new club, neither does Messi. So I don't necessarily think Liverpool are going to be stuck. I think I said to a couple of, he's not Winston Bogart, is he? He's not going to sit in the reserves for 2 years and take the money. So I feel like if it's over length, you would think that they could get that done, couldn't you? That would suit all parties.
Yeah, he's not gonna drop off a cliff overnight, is he? Maybe 2-3 years time you're not getting the same output that you're getting today, but they're the risks you have to take. I think. I think at a certain point you have to stop being uber cautious in the way that Liverpool are ran. Maybe necessarily it's not their model, but it's the way they're sort of bound by the ownership. And it's interesting. I'd love to know how high up this contract situation goes at the club and beyond into the sort of ownership level. FSG have this thing, call it an ownership decision. I've heard Billy Hogan talk about it in the past. I've spoke to Peter Moore about it, and they describe it as an ownership decision. Now, normally a player's contract wouldn't go that far up the chain. It's the sporting director who would be looking after it. But does Salah, is he a special case because of the sums involved, because of the importance of him on the pitch, because of his profile outside of the club? All of these things, in a normal world, it'd be Richard Hughes sort of speaking to Rami, but does Michael Edwards get involved? I'm almost certain he does. Does John Henry get involved? What's the input from Tom Werner? Does Mike Gordon even sort of still have an input on this sort of stuff? And I
he got involved last time, didn't he? I know he's still officially
at
the club last time, but he did certainly get involved.
Yeah, well, obviously that would be Michael Edwards' remit then, wouldn't it? But does he even go above him and the real sort of head honchos? How much of an input are they having? So all this is interesting and fascinating. But like we say, I suppose with David Ornstein's update last night, this is a good step in the right direction, if not quite the give him his dough, sign on the dotted line stuff that the supporters were hoping for.
When it comes to risks, and I'd make the same argument about Virgil van Dijk as well. Obviously, Alexander-Arnold is a different case entirely, but for those two, I think what's the bigger risk? You keep him, and in a couple of years' time, you're stuck in having to try and offload him, or you let them go and fall off a cliff next year because you have a Salah or Van Dijk shaped hole in your team. And I think you look at the statistics now, neither of them are. I mean, I would argue this is Van Dijk so far. The levels he's reaching is one of his best seasons. Maybe certainly
for the last 4 years.
Yeah, for 4 years. So maybe he's reaching levels that he reached when they won the title the season before that, when he was brilliant. So, and Salah is reaching levels that he's never reached really at Liverpool, has he? You know, even in the 44 goal season. All right, he was a very different player, but I think he's further ahead now, isn't he? Am I right in saying that?
He
in
might
terms
be.
of goals?
He's got 15 now.
I'm sure he's further ahead now. Someone correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, than he was during that season. So it's not like the levels are going. And I think the biggest thing I think for Liverpool is if they let these players go, and all right, you know, they might save a lot of money on wages, but you've got to replace them both next summer. And then you add that to all the other work you're doing in terms of you're bringing in a new goalkeeper potentially. We know that obviously they've signed one, but bedding him in. Potentially a new right back if Alexander-Arnold goes. Potentially a new left back because that's a position that we're talking about. Not just one centre back. Then you're probably looking at two.
Maybe
midfielder.
Number 9. That's a conversation as well.
Yeah, number 9 comes. So you're looking at such a huge outlay next summer, and if you don't get them right, what sort of pressure does that put on Richard Hughes, who's not long into the club? What does it put onto a whole new recruitment team that Michael Edwards is sort of helping to bed in? So I know it goes much bigger and beyond that, and we're talking about huge figures, but I do think just in terms of football risk that I think it's much riskier to let them go than it is to keep them.
Yeah.
With the levels they're putting in.
Yeah, and you know, ultimately at some point, your sporting endeavour has got to come ahead of the business side of things, doesn't it? You know, Liverpool there's a chance here that he could win the league,
and they're not struggling business wise. It's not like you look at Liverpool and go, they've got to save money from somewhere.
You need to offload a big player or get someone off the wage bill. No, Liverpool have been run really well, haven't they, for a number of years? And we know that the reason these contracts are where they are is because of a myriad of reasons, haven't they? We're going back to 2 years with the ownership of, you know, putting the club up for sale tentatively, if not sort of officially, and then the sporting director knock-on effect and all that sort of stuff, Klopp leaving. So there are big reasons why Liverpool are where they are with these contract situations, and it's sort of been unfairly dropped on the lap of Richard Hughes. But at some point you have to think that these key players mean more to the club than what they'd save on wages and trying to bring to the next sort of the new era, if you guess, because there's absolutely no guarantee that they're going to be as prolific as Salah or as, you know, important as Van Dijk defensively.
Yeah, and just in terms of finances, I mean, this again might be a lazy way of looking at it, but you would think that next year's accounts you're going to have back into the Champions League.
Yeah.
Klopp's wages, I'm sure, were much higher than Slot's.
Yeah.
I know you'll have had the money that they've spent to get Slot in the first place, but they didn't spend money on players, or barely. You know, they got Chiesa, didn't they? There are other big players that have come off the wage bill in recent years. Thiago being one of them, who was on a lot of money. So you would think that Liverpool will be even more of a healthy position when the next accounts come out.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the Champions League
is deal as well, aren't they?
Well, yeah, that Adidas one we think is coming down the line, isn't it? Yeah, you're right. The Champions League one, especially because the Europa League is just nowhere near as lucrative. Liverpool went out in the quarter-final stages there. There's 2 extra games in the Champions League this season. Yeah. If you win both of those, it's probably 5 or 6 million in prize money, and that's before you're talking about how much can be earned by going into the latter stages of the competition, which they are going to do now, aren't they? Really. So, yeah, I think that's a big one. There's loads of reasons to be optimistic as to why Liverpool are doing well, you know, from a business point of view. So I just think at some point you have to just let go of the reins a little bit and you know, trust that these players are going to continue to deliver for you in the next 2 years.
Yeah. Ian McCartney, we'll move on from contracts in a minute, but Ian McCartney's put us on the spot and says, do you think Trent's going to stay or not? I don't know how you feel about answering that. I'm happy to say that I've got a bad feeling about it.
Yeah, I mean, only, you know, you're asking my opinion at this stage. I'm becoming more and more resigned to seeing him leave. But, you know, the noises are that Liverpool remain optimistic. And in David Ornstein's piece yesterday, the piece that we were talking about with Salah, it does just sort of mention that, you know, an offer has been made for Alexander-Arnold as well, and perhaps, you know, that's not its own news, suggests that, you know, it's maybe not quite what his entourage have hoped for or whatever, but the more it goes on, the more I'm looking at it thinking potentially Alexander-Arnold leaves.
Yeah, me too. I think of the three of them, you know, you've got the most likely place he goes to, Real Madrid. Have made no secret of the fact that they're really interested in him. You know, I think it makes sense for him to go there from a sort of footballing point of view. If you were him, I could understand him thinking, Roberto Carlos, made famous in the Real Madrid machine, I could be the same. Obviously, his mate Bellingham's there. It's sad, but I can understand why he would want to go. It might hurt saying that about a local lad, but I don't think you should hide the fact that they're ambitious, and I don't really blame him for thinking like that. And it's not his fault that it's got to this stage. Again, it's Liverpool's fault entirely that they've allowed his contract to get to this stage.
One thing I would say is if Salah or Van Dijk left, I think the frustration and the anger would be directed at the club.
Yeah.
I think if Alexander-Arnold leaves, I think that frustration might come back to him rather than the club on that one, you know, rightly or wrongly. But let's hope it doesn't come to that, and we don't have to have that as a topic of discussion.
Yeah, I do think the longer the season goes on and the better season Liverpool have, and obviously you can tell, I mean, you read every interview, you can tell in body language the players have been very impressed with Slot. Everything you've been told, isn't it? That he's made a really positive impact. Trent again, I mean, we can say this about a lot of players. I think he's playing some of his best football. I think his defending has improved massively under Slot. And you feel like there's a rapport there already. So I don't know, the longer the season goes on, I wonder more and more whether Trent could start thinking, you know what, I was thinking that maybe Real Madrid would be the better option, but Liverpool might be the better option. You know, Julian Baxendale's just said that, you know, are Real Madrid the better option than Liverpool? Look, I think Real Madrid guarantees you trophies almost every season. And they're never that far away. Even when they have a bad year, they're never that far away from a good year following that. But
I mean, Bellingham's just won the La Liga and Champions League in his first year, hasn't he? They're always at the business end of the Champions League. But maybe Trent looked at it the other week, and seen Liverpool sort of running riots against Madrid, and thought, maybe it's better the devil, you know. But, you know, it's the interest will be there, and I'm pretty sure his agent will be fielding calls on New Year's Day with proposals. Yeah,
certainly. Right, let's move on from contracts. I get to a couple of questions and we'll talk the Derby postponement. But we'll begin with a couple of questions. We'll start with these couple of transfery ones. M. Derso says, good morning, guys. Do you think Anthony Robinson from Fulham will be a good left-back fit for us? Seems the type Slot would like. I watched him last night. I just didn't think he was very good.
Oh, really?
No, I thought he was all right at times, but I mean, look, he's obviously a local lad, isn't he? Came through at Everton. He does always post good numbers. I'm not too sure his age right now. I don't know whether he's...
I'm not actually, no.
Mid-20s. But Ian Crowler's just given me a nod. He's going to have a look for me. But I do like him. I just think that Liverpool might be... Watching Robertson and watching him, I still think Robertson's the better player. He's 27.
He's 27. I think that shit might have sailed now, actually. I didn't realise he was that old. Yeah, I saw Miguel Delaney at the Independent tweet yesterday that, you know, I think he argued that no one's handled Saka as well as Anthony Robinson did yesterday in the draw with Fulham and Arsenal. There's a few sort of good left backs knocking about, isn't there? I think Marco Silva described him as one of the best in the world as well, actually, after the game, which is big praise. But there's a few obviously who seem to be named in connection with Liverpool of late. Obviously, Kirkesh at Bournemouth and Ryan Aït-Nouri at Wolves. I think ultimately it's an area Liverpool will have to look at. You know, they've got two specialist left backs, senior left backs at the moment, who between them are doing the job. I'm surprised by how much of a almost first teamer Tsimikas has made himself this season, but Robertson has been okay of late. But I think long term that's probably something Liverpool need to look at. But what I'd probably say is if Robinson's already 27, that, you know, it might be sort of exclude him out of the running, because I think Liverpool have only signed, was it two players who were over 30 since 2016, I'm not sure how many players over 26. I don't think it'll be that many.
Yeah, someone said Rams was bad for most of Arsenal's goal. Obviously, second disallowed. I thought that, and I thought as well he just didn't use the ball as well. When Fulham were trying to get away and they were under pressure, didn't use the ball as well as I thought he would do. And I do think, it's a big step up playing for Liverpool, isn't it? And Robertson, I don't think he's had quite the drop off that some people have made out.
Yeah.
But granted, except that he certainly doesn't look quite at the levels he used to be at. But I still think he's at levels above a lot of other players in his position. And I think if you look at the way he uses the ball, I would still argue it's probably superior to most others. So yeah, I don't think he's the type of player Liverpool would pay a fee for unless it was a very small one or they got him on a free. And then another question from Wilson, who says, I've always backed our owners, but wondered why we never strengthened when we've been on top. Would you guys be surprised if we didn't sign anyone in January? Now you did a piece on this morning, didn't you?
Yeah, I just think it's there now for Liverpool. It's really opened up for them to be aggressive and proactive, and almost the opposite of what they were in the summer window, where they were patient and passive. And they signed Chiesa in like the last week, didn't they? Because it was become clear that he was going to be frozen out at Juventus. And they'd taken advantage of a contract situation and looked to maybe strike a bargain, which as of yet hasn't come off. I don't think you can argue that it has. But I think Liverpool could flip that strategy on its head for January and think, all being well, at the top of the Premier League, still top of the Champions League, it feels like a chance to really strengthen from a position of power. And Liverpool have always said that if there's a deal to be done in January, it's because it's become available for someone for the summer, so they can sort of bring it forward 6 months. That's certainly the case with Luis Diaz and probably Cody Gakpo as well. So can Liverpool do that again in January? I think the writing's on the wall for Wataru Endo now. I think he started 2 games all season, both in the Carabao Cup. If he starts against Southampton, Liverpool get beat in that, how many more games is he going to start from the beginning without injuries? Probably that Accrington game in the Cup. So do Liverpool sort of bring in a player to fill his role 6 months early? I think it's something they could probably look at. I don't think they need loads doing, but I just think if they can just be a little bit more sort of on the front foot in January, it could make all the difference for the rest of the season, because it's opened up for them, which I didn't think they thought was going to happen.
Agreed, 100%. I think I look back at certain seasons when, I always think back, and this sounds strange considering how well they played that season, but when we're going for all 4 in 2022, I think around that Christmas time, they had a few injuries, and I think it was midfield area. I could be wrong, but I remember sitting on pods talking about, like, I wish they'd just strengthen in that area, because I feel like that could cost them. And I feel like Liverpool now, obviously doing really, really well, but if they just strengthened the central midfield, centre defence.
You look at Gravenberch. He's played 90 minutes in every Premier League and Champions League game, and he's been probably Liverpool's best player this season. But he started to look a bit leggy against Newcastle. He got dispossessed 3 times in the first half. Wasn't his best game at Liverpool, which is fine. It can happen. But are they going to run him into the ground? Is he going to look more and more tired as the season goes on? The sort of alternative is Endo, who I think Slot doesn't really fancy. I think he played 45 minutes against Betis in the friendly, and that was enough for Slot to make up his mind that that this guy isn't necessarily going to be what I need in midfield. So Zubimendi, does that interest get reignited? How much has he burned his bridges by performing a U-turn at the time? Liverpool probably don't seem like the club who would cut the nose off to spite the face. They seem very sort of cold, and we've seen it with the contracts, haven't we? Very business oriented with these big decisions. So could that be back on the cards? I'm not sure, but I just think, like you say, it is there for them to go for and beef up the squad. I think
if there's any chance that they can go and get Zubimendi in January, I think they will do it, and I think they should do it. The money's there. We know the money's there, don't we? So I he's had 6 more months of those mountains, hasn't he? So, yeah. So
he's been up and down every Sunday.
Yeah. So hopefully he's got plenty of trips to them, and he can get over to Merseyside. Yeah. And I think the club would do it. I think they're not the club to cut the nose off to spite their face. I remember at the time, I'm sure you wrote at the time that it was all done. very amicable. The calls of Richard Hughes, I think he called him personally, didn't he? I remember at the time. So I just could imagine that if his agent gets onto Liverpool and says, you know what, he is available.
Who Richard Hughes knows very well, of course.
Yeah, I think they would do that, and they would do that quite quickly, and they should. I think they should strengthen both in.
And also as well, Liverpool's history of January transfers is really good.
It's strong, isn't it? I mean,
you'd always hear this, it's tough to find quality, but it isn't. I mean, maybe it is, but Liverpool have done a good job of it. Van Dijk, Suarez, Coutinho, Sturridge, Diaz, Gakpo. Even going back to the days of Daniel Agger, Liverpool have been able to scale, I guess. Liverpool have really been able to...
they actually got in January.
Yeah. They've been able to improve the squad, in January without as much difficulty as it's made out to be at times, I guess.
Yeah. So I suppose the question was, would you be surprised? I think on the face of that evidence, we shouldn't be surprised.
No, but
I'm always quite surprised when Liverpool go and do things.
Yeah, I still think Liverpool will keep the powder dry. I mean, I really hope I'm wrong, for the reasons I've just outlined, but I always think that they think let's keep the status quo as it is.
Yeah.
Status?
I thought it was status quo.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to get pulled up on it.
No.
Either
but I just feel like Liverpool would just, keep everything as it is ticking along without thinking that, a transfer can be a net positive.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about the derby. Obviously, the postponement on Saturday, I think, was the right call, and we were saying it up in Liverpool. They were surprised it wasn't really made earlier because, it was very, very wind on on Saturday morning. Yeah. But I mean, it's kind of turned out quite well, hasn't it? I wanted Liverpool to play that game. I thought 12:30 might have been a good equaliser to Goodison under the lights. I think Goodison under the lights is much harder. Just like as Anfield under the lights is much more atmospheric. But you look at the weekend and the way it's gone. City have dropped more points. Arsenal dropped points. Chelsea came from behind. I think we need to probably take them more seriously than they have been taken. But certainly Arsenal and City, certainly Arsenal, watching them yesterday, it felt like a huge blow. They reacted like they've been beaten, and it sort of evens out that draw, doesn't it, in Newcastle?
Yeah, it probably does feel like that for Arsenal because they had a late goal chalked off as well, didn't he? So, I mean, didn't see the game, but I was getting updates, not least from you, actually. But, yeah, it's
I was texting you.
Really, really good weekend for Liverpool,
You didn't, so you weren't watching it, but when I texted you to say Arsenal had scored in the last minute, you told me it had been ruled out quicker than I'd seen it.
Yeah, I was getting updates from elsewhere. Always want to be first with the news. Yeah, it was a good weekend, wasn't it? City struggling again. Chelsea with a really good result, to be fair to them, at Tottenham. And like you say, I think maybe it's time to start taking them a little bit seriously. But I just think with Chelsea, they might just have 1 or 2, 3 or 4 draws that they should win along the way, and then that might ultimately rule them out. It'd be an unbelievable job by Enzo Maresca if they put together a title run.
I'd only say that I agree with Carragher. He said that this is no underdog story to spend
billions. That is true. It's
just
they just look like 40 players getting mashed together and just go on sort of team out of it. But yeah, other than that, good weekend for Liverpool. They got the I mean, in terms of postponing the derby, it will be more difficult if it's a night game and it's under the lights. The last Goodison derby was always going to be a difficult assignment for Liverpool, but if it's a night game now, I think the atmosphere will be ramped up, levels, and we saw Liverpool wilt at Goodison in April, so that will be something to consider. But on the flip side, they won't have McAllister suspended. Hopefully, they should have a few more back from injury. Diogo Jota's been training today, hasn't he? Open training. Alisson Becker as well. Conor Bradley. So there are pros and cons for it, really. I think Everton's more direct style, shall we say, might have suited them in the win. So that was another plus point for it being called off. Gives the chance for a number of players to have a rest. Ryan Gravenberch, probably the main one that we've spoken about. I'm not even sure I'd be playing him against Girona on Tuesday, to be fair, with the Liverpool's healthy position in the Champions League. So at a time when the games are coming thick and fast, for them to have best part of 10 days off between Premier League games, that could make all the difference, really. We might see them fly up the straps against Fulham on Saturday and really get that Newcastle game out of the system and push on. So, pros and cons for it, but ultimately I think from a football perspective, I think probably just about benefits Liverpool for the little break in play, and then let's move it down the line and see when it is.
Yeah, certainly. I agree. I think I did before the game. I wanted them to play it, but I think, like you say, the state of the weather, Everton getting their set piece mojo back on Wednesday night against
just on the back of
Wolves.
a 4-0 win as well.
Yeah, the tails up a little bit more, and then the fact that Liverpool did. I thought they did quite well at Newcastle. I'd argue that I was obviously not happy with the way the point came about, but I was really impressed the way they took a game which at half time looked like could have been taken away from them completely, went through the gears and looked like a really classy outfit and took the lead and sort of overcame adversity a little bit in that game. But they looked out on their feet at times in that game as well. And I think maybe Saturday could have been a step too far. In fact, one of the questions again from M. Derso was, do you think slots rotating enough? I feel like we could have our legs fall off if we don't start rotating more with the likes of Endo, Morton, Kwanzaa.
It's difficult to criticise that though, because Liverpool are absolutely flying.
Yeah.
I mean, they're only 4 points clear of Chelsea now, but they've obviously got the game in hand, so it's difficult to say that he should be rotating more, because that brings with it jeopardy of players not being as good as the ones you're replacing. So
you also don't want to start losing games. I feel like it's a spirit and a feeling. The more games you win, the more it breeds more wins. So,
yeah. I mean, we knew that Real Madrid and City that week would have taken loads out of the players, but had he made 4 or 5 changes at Newcastle might have swallowed Liverpool up, and you're talking about that lead being whittled down. So it's tough, isn't it? And this is why maybe we're talking about boosting the squad in January. I think up front they're okay for now. Defensively, maybe, but how many games would a new defender play? But certainly in midfield, it's an issue because Harvey Elliott barely played all season, has he? 2 appearances. A couple of minutes at the end of the City game, was it? And then obviously then that 10-minute cameo against Bournemouth in August. So he's been a miss. He's been absent. Endo, I just think we've spoken loads about Endo, but I think ultimately Slot has made his decision, and it's very clear what that decision is. So there's not that many options there, are there really? Tyler Morton is probably desperate to push on in January himself.
Looked good at Brighton as well, Tyler Morton, to be fair to him.
Yeah, he's a good player, but I'm sure he's desperate to kick on in January and maybe move on. So, if they do allow him to move on, I think they're going to need a midfielder. But in terms of rotating and resting and stuff, they can't really justify it too much because the results have been superb.
John Marie says Paul saying Conor Bradley's back. No, he's back. He said he thought he was out until January. I think he is going to be out until around.
No, do you know what? A few people sort of misconstrued what I meant when I put the tweet out as well. Basically, with the derby being postponed, that means that when Liverpool play Everton next, ideally they should have Conor Bradley back.
Yeah, that wouldn't be till February.
McAllister won't be suspended. And Jota should be back, and Alisson should be back whenever that game is.
Yeah, we don't expect. We looked at the fixture list, and it's most likely if Liverpool get through top 8 in the Champions League, which is looking very likely that Liverpool could play that game in first couple of weeks of February. I think I'd be surprised if it was any later than that. Because I don't think there's any.
You don't want it too late further down the line, do you?
No. Right, let's talk a little bit about Girona. Actually, sorry, there's one more question that I want to get to. The big question, actually, from Julian Baxendale: are we reaching the stage where we should win the league?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you'd have to look at Liverpool as favourites.
Oh yeah, I think you'd look at Liverpool's favourites now. I don't believe in all this like you bottle the league and all that. I think the league season is very long and very difficult, and put it this way: if you've got a run of tough games, it's not necessarily bottling it to then drop points. But I think I blue skied after the game. I think City lost the game before going into the City game. So Liverpool didn't believe now; they'll never believe. And I think the same. They must be looking at the results around them, thinking, "We can do this. We can win this league." And
so, how many games has there been now? Is it 12, 13?
13.
You look at Arsenal; drop points in at least half of those.
Yeah.
So,
15 Arsenal played. Liverpool played 14.
Yeah. So how many games have Arsenal dropped points in? 7 or 8?
Yeah, 7 games. Yeah.
That's not really sustainable, is it? Manchester City look like they're having a bit of a dawning of a new era is needed. Or a little bit like Liverpool for the not last season, the season before.
Yeah.
You know, it looked like it was just gone to the well one too many times with the same set of players, maybe the same voice, the same messages aren't hammering home as much as they used to, and they've got players with CVs who perhaps, you know, how much is left in the tank to go and add to that. So they just look like they're massively out of sorts. Still not totally doubting their ability to go on a run of 10 games on the spin. But at the moment, it looks so far away from happening, doesn't it? As it ever has, really. What is it? 1 win in 9 games or something now across all competitions.
Yeah.
Chelsea looked like a bit of a surprise package emerging in the last couple of months. But Liverpool, let's say Liverpool win that game in hand, and it's a tough one, of course, but you know, if they win it, that gap, if they'd played Saturday and won, the gap is 7 points heading into mid-December. I don't think anyone would have thought that would have been possible. I think if Liverpool would have been on the coattails of Man City around this time, you'd be talking about it being a good season so far. So the fact that they're in such an advantageous position, I think you have to start looking at it thinking Liverpool, not necessarily should, as in nailed on title favourites, but like you say there, if you don't believe that they can win it, then what's the point in following it? You might as well just pack up and tune in May and see where they are.
Yeah, and league title seasons are forged throughout the season. You know, you can get yourselves into a position where you suddenly believe that it's yours to win, and
things can massively
change. You play like champions, if that makes sense.
No, you can tell, can't you, when the side's got a little swagger about them, and it's almost like, well, these know they're going to win it. Yeah. You sort of got that a little bit with Leicester all those years ago, and towards the end of it, they were just winning games, and they just looked like they knew that they were going to win it. Yeah. But I think there's a few months before you can start getting that feeling for the team. Yeah. December is the one, isn't it? Particularly over Christmas and New Year, where the games come low. You know, you don't even know what day it is, and you turn on the telly and there's a Premier League game. Things can happen a lot. Yeah. Points can be dropped. And I look at Arsenal last season, they got beat by West Ham at home, and then they got beat by Fulham, and ultimately they don't win the league. So a lot can happen around that time. So if Liverpool can get to the Manchester United game in a similar position that they're in now, which I think is January the 5th, is it? Yeah. I think then you can start really looking at it thinking this could be something special.
I think the plus point for Liverpool at the moment is, like you say, City look like they're having one of those seasons where they need to refresh. I will never, even with all the current form, I would never look at City and say they can't put a run together, because we know that the City team can put runs together. But I would say that Arsenal, Chelsea, a bit of a new outfit, so we don't really know too much about them. But Arsenal, I mean, their top scorer in the league is Kai Havertz with 5 goals. You know, you look at City, Chelsea, and Liverpool is Haaland 13, Salah 13, Palmer 11. You know, that just looks like a massive weakness for Arsenal. And I've seen a few tweets about how the types of point totals they'd have to now put in to get beyond 90, and they'd have to go at an incredible rate, and they haven't shown this season that they can go at that rate. I think they've got great set pieces, and I think they've built themselves a very strong, sturdy team, but I just don't know whether they've got the X factor up front to take them away. I think Saka's a great player, but he doesn't post numbers that Salah does. You know, I think he's actually, I mean, this might be completely wrong, and you know, you might, but he feels to me closer to a Diaz than he is a Salah in terms of his output. So I just think with Arsenal being where they are like that, I just don't know whether they could make up the gap now on Liverpool.
Yeah.
If Liverpool, like you say, can get through to January with that sort of gap, whether Arsenal have got it in them to make that up. Whereas City always had it in them, didn't they? And you knew they could eat up the gap.
Historic evidence for it, haven't you, which is what you base a lot of these decisions on, you know, evidence of what's gone before. And that's always been the criticism for Arsenal, isn't it, on their title aspirations. Have they got a real proper top-class goal scorer? You know, Gabriel Jesus is a good player.
He's
but
got twice all season.
Exactly, yeah. Havertz, like you say, is on 5. They do rely an awful lot on their corners and set pieces. And look, it done the business for them against United in the week. But sometimes when a team can defend those, or they're not quite on the money, what else have you got in the tank? And so far, Arsenal haven't really shown that. You know, their supporters will argue till the blue in the face about the sendings off and the decisions and all that sort of stuff. But like I say, they played 15 games, did you say? And they dropped points in at least 7 or 8 of them. So that's not that's not a team who's going to win the league, is it?
Yeah, they've got goals across the team. I'm just looking at the top scorers are Havertz and Saka on 5 apiece, and you just, I think now with the numbers that the other players seem to get, you just need to get across the line. You need a lot, don't you?
Yeah.
And Salah is obviously look. And the other thing as well, don't forget injuries can come into it. God forbid, touch wood, if one of Liverpool's big players got injured tomorrow, then you might see them drop off.
Joss hasn't played for 2 months.
But yeah,
First choice number 9.
Yeah,
Alisson hasn't played for over 2 months.
Yeah, so yeah, it's they're in an incredible position. But we are running out of time, and we need to pick our team and predict some results for Girona. Forgive us for not really speaking a lot about Girona, but Ian Doyle is out there, and I think he will provide you with a podcast from Girona to maybe talk about that game in more detail.
He's been knee deep in Girona research, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure he has. But it does feel like Liverpool are in such a strong position in the Champions League. One more win sort of guarantees them top 8, I think, doesn't it? And then on top of that, I do think there's an argument Liverpool will want to win that league stage.
Yeah,
to send them into the strongest position.
Yeah. How much do you want to win it? I think it's big inside the club for the prize money for winning games, because I always remember when Liverpool went to Michelin, wasn't it? And it was in COVID, and Liverpool didn't need to win it, and Klopp still went strong, and Jota gets injured, and he's out for 2 months with a knee injury. So you've got to be careful to balance it. So I'd be minded to rest and rotate a fair few. We know McAllister's suspended.
So go on, what give us your team, and we'll just do it that way.
Alisson's back in training today, isn't he?
Yeah.
We'll get an update from Slot as to how close he is for tomorrow. But I still think he'll go with Kelleher. Does Jarell Kwanzaa start at right back? I think he might, actually. Gomez and Van Dijk, by virtue of him not really having any other centre backs, and Robertson ditto, really, no other left back is there.
Yeah.
Options are stretched defensively, so that'll have to be the back 5. Would you make any changes there?
No, I'd go along with that. I think, like you say, let Trent. I mean, I think he was obviously worried about him in Newcastle. He probably would have played the derby, wouldn't he? But he wouldn't have played this game had he played the derby.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good chance to just keep him fresh.
Keep him for full.
Yeah. So I would do the same.
I mean, Liverpool, with that postponement of the derby, they've only really got one game a week now, Premier League wise, because half of them aren't going to play at Southampton, are they?
No.
I think tomorrow as well. I think Endo will come in. I think it'd be a nice chance to start Elliott as the number 10, and maybe just keep Curtis in there a little bit further back.
It's exactly the same. The only one I would argue is maybe Morton, because he looked so good at Brighton, and I would like to have another look at him. I think he will play in Southampton, but I'd almost argue he could play tomorrow night. I mean, this is harsh because I quite like Endo, but I look at Endo and think, well, if he's not using Endo, Morton is a younger player. Could you put Morton in there alongside Jones and then play Elliott? It's a very youthful midfield, but they're all. I mean, Jones and Elliott are youthful, but they've played hundreds of games for Liverpool, and then Morton's obviously very experienced in the Championship.
Morton played at AC Milan, didn't he, 2 years ago? So not total novice.
I think I would probably, I've talked myself into that. I'd probably go with that.
Yeah, up front, again, the options are thinning. I don't expect Jota to start tomorrow, even though he's back in training. It'd be great to see him on the bench, just to see him on the bench more than any sort of cameo. But yeah, I think he might go Núñez, Diaz, Salah, and give Gakpo a little bit of a breather.
Yeah, go along with that. I think it makes sense, doesn't it? And that's the area you've still got a little bit of rotation, and Jota back. Get him on some minutes. I think
maybe Chiesa on the bench. Played an hour, didn't he, for these 21s last week?
Well, didn't train, did he, today? Apparently that's due to illness. Yeah. So if he's not over that, well, I think if he's not trained today, he won't travel, really, because if he's ill, they're not going to put him on the plane, are they? So that's a blow. And I think this would have been a really good chance for him. So
major Alberto Aquilani vibes now for Chiesa.
Yeah.
I always remember Aquilani fans were waiting for months for him to play, and then he got fit. And then he picked up an illness just before he played Fulham. I think it was the end of October. And then it was just a knock-on effect, wasn't it?
There's a bit of luck with these things, but also, it just doesn't... Yeah, it doesn't feel like it's worked, does it? So far. Give us a prediction.
Yeah, honestly, I can't even think of how Girona have been getting on. I haven't even had a chance to look.
3-0 by Real Madrid at the weekend.
Yeah.
They were singing "Bring on the English."
Say Liverpool 2-0.
Yeah.
Liverpool haven't conceded in the Champions League since the 3rd minute against AC Milan,
yeah.
which was the first game. So they've gone a lot of minutes without conceding there in the European Cup. So I think Girona will do well to add to that list.
Yeah, the mid-table in Spain, and I always think with the Champions League, it suits Liverpool. You know,
They lost Savinho as well. Didn't he, City.
So I fancy Liverpool to win tomorrow night. I think maybe 3-1, and I feel like the pace of the game will suit them. You know, especially if they do make changes, it allows people to settle and get on the ball a little bit. So and likes of Elliott, you would think would thrive in that. So yeah, I fancy Liverpool as well. So I'm going to say 3-1. And that is all we've got time for. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your comments and your questions. Do keep them coming in. As I say, feel free to drop me an email, joe.rimmer@reachplc.com, if you'd like a question on a future pod. Otherwise, thanks for your support. Like, subscribe, follow us, give us a review, all those nice things, and we will see you on Friday. Yeah, you should have a bonus pod from Doyley out in Spain, but we will see you on Friday to react to Girona, to look forward to Fulham, and I'm sure I'll talk about contracts, transfers, and everything else besides. See you then. It's all right.